Welcome to Trench Diaries. This is Stuka Pilot, Part 12. Chapter 15. The Battle for Hungary. It is one of the last days of August. I take off early in the morning to fly into the area where the Reds have broken through in the north and have climbed to 150 feet above my own aerodrome. Suddenly, the flak opens fire. It is manned by Romanians who are supposed to defend our airfield against attacks by Russian and American aircraft. I look in the direction of the bursting shells and search the sky for enemy bombers. Have the Americans got up so early this morning? I bank over the runway with my formation so as to wait for further developments under the protection of our own AA defense. Curiously, the puffs of the bursting shells have shifted lower down, and some of them are unpleasantly close to my aircraft. I look down at the firing batteries and see that the guns are swiveling round to follow our maneuvers. One burst just misses me. There is not an enemy plane in sight. Now there is no longer any doubt the flag is firing at us. It is quite inexplicable to me, but it must be so. We fly north on our mission against the Soviet offensive, which is pushing on in force from the area Husi-Balad-Foscari. On our return to the aerodrome, I am prepared for any further flag antics on the part of the Romanians. My ground control has already told me as we fly back that the guns were aimed at me. From now on, Romania is at war with us. We at once come in at low level, landing singly. Individual AA guns again open fire on us, but with no more success than before. I immediately go to the telephone and get put through to the Romanian Air Commodore Ionescu. He is in command of Romanian Air Force units, including flak, and I know him well personally from Husi. He also wears German decorations. I tell him I have to assume that the unfriendly attentions of this morning were meant for me and my squadron, and I ask him if this is so. He does not deny it. He says that his AA gunners have seen a German fighter shoot down a Romanian courier plane, and that consequently, even here, they are greatly incensed and are firing at all German aircraft. He does not yet make any mention of the state of war existing between Germany and Romania. I reply to his complaint that I have not the least intention of standing for this nonsense, and that I was going out on another sortie against the Russians north of Ramkulserat. Now, however, I propose first to bomb and machine gun the flag on our aerodrome with my Stuka squadron in order to eliminate the possibility of any interference with our start. With the other squadron, we shall attack his staff headquarters. I know exactly where they are. Oh, for God's sake, don't do that. We've always been the best of friends, and we cannot be held responsible for the actions of our governments. In fact, I will make you a proposition. We will neither of us do anything, and as far as we are concerned, the declaration of war does not exist. I will give you my personal guarantee that not another shot will be fired in my command against your Stukas. He re-asseverates his old friendship for me and his friendly feelings towards us Germans in general. With this, a separate peace enters into force for both of us, nor have I any further grounds for complaint. A curious situation. I am here alone with my flying personnel on this aerodrome in a country at war with us. 2 Romanian divisions with all their equipment, including heavy artillery, surround our airfield. Who is to stop them liquidating us overnight? In the hours of darkness, this is a very uncomfortable predicament. In the daylight, we are strong again. Even 2 divisions are not likely to show themselves too aggressive against my Stukas when they are so concentrated and exposed in this open country. Our store of bombs and petrol on the aerodrome are running low, and no supplies are reaching us as Romania can no longer be held. Our only chance is to move to the other side of the Carpathians and to attempt there to form a new front out of the remnants of our armies which are able to fight their way out of Romania, and such other troops as can be scraped together anywhere as reserves. It is perfectly clear that our heavy artillery will never get across the Carpathians, but will be left behind in Romania. If only a large part of our gallant army could extricate itself from this witch's cauldron of treachery for which the Romanian government is to blame. Weapons can be replaced, however difficult it may be, but men, never. Our ground staff gets ready to take the road over the Bazau Pass. We use up the last drop of petrol attacking the Russian spearhead, which has thrust closer and closer to Busau. Partly, our missions take us far behind the Russian lines to relieve German units which are still engaged in bitter fighting there. It is a pitiful spectacle, enough to drive one to desperation, the way these veterans of the Russian campaign, surrounded by the enemy, still butt their heads against an oncoming wall of vastly superior numbers until gradually they have nothing left to resist with, save their small arms. The artillery have long since used up all their ammunition, soon they will not have even a rifle or revolver cartridge. To attack and attack again is the only way to endure it. A little Stalingrad, if you will. Now our stores on the aerodrome are finally exhausted and we fly west over the Carpathians to our new operational base at Sächsisch-Regen in Hungary. In this little town almost everyone speaks German. It is a citadel of the Transylvanian Germans. Here there is a German church and German schools. As one walks through the town, one never has the feeling that one is not in Germany. It nestles picturesquely between chains of hills and little mountains, with large tracts of woodland in the vicinity. Our airfield is on a kind of plateau with woods on either side. We are billeted in the town and in neighboring purely German villages north and northeast of it. Our operations at the moment are directed against the enemy pushing across the Carpathian passes from the east. The country offers excellent defensive positions, but we have not the strength to hold it, having lost the essential heavy artillery in Romania. Even the most favorable terrain cannot be defended against the most modern weapons by heroism alone. We make low-level attacks on the Oitos Pass and the Gymnos Pass and the mountain roads to the north of them. I have had experience of mountain flying in the Caucasus, but the valleys here are extremely narrow, particularly at the bottom, and it is necessary to gain considerable height before one can turn round in them. The roads over the passes are tortuous and for long stretches are engulfed in cutting hewn out of the craggy mountain slopes. As the vehicles and tanks generally keep under the lee of the cliffs, one has to be devilishly careful not to bump into them here or there. If another formation is out in the same area at the same time, perhaps approaching its target from the other side of the valley and not so quickly recognized through the haze, then for a fraction of a second, death lays a bony finger on the joystick when the one formation meets the other flying in the opposite direction. That is a greater danger than the flag, though this is by no means negligible. It is partly sighted on the mountainsides, to right and to left of the roads over the passes, because the enemy flag has realized its relative ineffectiveness if it remains with the convoys on the road while we, for instance, attack a unit lower down from behind another group of rocks. There is for the time being not much fighter opposition. Are the Russians so slow in getting the Romanian airfields in operation? I doubt it, because they have plenty of supply lines and the available airfields at Busau, Roman, Tecuci, Balkau and Silistea are perfectly situated and amply sufficient for this battle. Presumably the Ivans do not take any too kindly to mountain flying. They seem especially shy of low-level flying in the valleys because of the possibility of suddenly running into a cul-de-sac blocked by a sharply rising mountains. I gained the same impression 2 years ago in the passes and valleys of the Caucasus. I received orders at this time to take over the command of the wing and to relinquish my 3rd Squadron. As my successor as commander of the old squadron, I put up the name of Flight Lieutenant Lau. He served with it in Greece in the battle with the English fleet and distinguished himself there. After the first phase of the Russian campaign, he was seconded for staff duties and is now back at the front. As far as operational flying is concerned, the change hardly affects me. I have all types of utilizable aircraft put on the wing staff strength so that I may be able to fly with one or other of my units at any time. One day at the beginning of September, I am out early with my 3rd Squadron and 2nd accompanying us as escort. I myself am tank hunting in the Oitos Pass with an anti-tank aircraft. The situation up here does not look too pretty. I decide, therefore, to take off again as soon as we return in my FW-190. In the meantime, the others can have their aircraft serviced for the next sortie. Pilot Officer Hofmeister has one ready to take off and accompanies me as scout. We fly back to Oitos, make low-level attacks and reconnoiter the state of affairs in all the Carpathian passes and on the heights, from which we gain an overall picture of the general situation in our sector. I return, literally without a drop of petrol or a round of ammunition, to our airfield when I see 40 silvery shining aircraft flying towards me at the same altitude. We race close past each other. No deception is any longer admissible. They are all American Mustangs. I call to Hofmeister, "You are to land at once." I lower my undercarriage, my landing flaps, and am down before the Mustang formation has time to turn around and attack. The gliding into land was nervous work, for this is the moment when your aircraft is absolutely defenseless and there is nothing you can do but wait patiently until you come up to a stop. Hofmeister has evidently not come down as quickly as I have lost sight of him. I am still taxiing in at speed when, looking out, I see the Mustangs coming in for the attack and one of them heading straight for my aircraft. I hurriedly throw up the cockpit hood, I must still be moving at about 30 miles per hour, climb out onto the wing and drop off onto the ground and lie there flat a few seconds before the Mustang's cannon begin to bark. My aircraft, which has taxied on by herself for quite a distance, catches fire in the first attack. I am glad I am no longer in her. We have no flag on the airfield because no one had anticipated or been prepared for our withdrawal to the Hungarian airfields. Our material is unfortunately so reduced that all the airfields of Europe cannot be provided with AA defense at the drop of a hat. Our enemies, who have unlimited material at their disposal, can sight flag batteries at every street corner. We, unhappily, cannot. The Mustangs have dispersed over the whole airfield and are having some peacetime target practice. My squadron, which should have refueled and reloaded during my absence, is still on the ground. A number of transport planes, which have brought up ammunition, petrol and bombs, stand exposed in the open. Serviceable aircraft are in improvised hangars in the forest and are difficult to hit. But aircraft under repair and transport planes with bombs and petrol fly up into the air. The 40 Mustangs cannon keep up an unbroken tattoo as they shoot everything they see in flames. A helpless fury takes possession of me at having to look on without being able to hit back. All round the airfield, mushrooms of black smoke where isolated aircraft are on fire. In this pandemonium, one might think the end of the world had come. Absurd as it must sound, I try to snatch a wink of sleep. By the time I wake up, it will all be over. If the chap who keeps on coming at me happens to hit me, it will be easier to take if I am asleep. After the Mustang pilot set fire to my aircraft in the first attack, he must have spotted me lying to the side of her path. Perhaps he actually saw me drop off as he flew in. At any rate, he comes back at me again and again with his cannon and machine guns. Apparently, he cannot see clearly through the window behind which his sights are and through which he must aim. He probably cannot believe after every fly-in that he has not hit me. For after coming in once or twice, he roars over me obliquely, dipping his aircraft at 12 to 15 feet and take a look at me. I lie flat on my stomach all the time, hugging the pockmarked grass. I have not budged except to turn my head slightly to one side so as to squint at him through my lowered eyelids. Every time he comes in at me from in front, earth and sand from his bullets bespatter me right and left. Will he hit me the next time? To run for it is out of the question, for everything moving is instantly fired upon. And so it goes on for what seems to me an eternity. Now I feel sure that he has run out of ammunition, for after skimming once more obliquely over me, he flies off. His colleagues have also used up their ammunition, very profitably, it must be admitted. They reassemble above the airfield and fly away. Our airfield looks a terrible mess, especially at first sight. The first thing I do is to look for Pilot Officer Hofmeister. His aircraft is lying on the perimeter of the field. He must have been slower in landing and was caught on the way down. He is wounded, one foot has to be amputated. 50 aircraft are burning and exploding on the airfield. Luckily, only a few of my serviceable planes, which, well covered as they were not an easy target. Now I am told when visiting each unit in the forest that during the attack the ground personnel kept up an uninterrupted small arms fire as ordered with Tommy guns, rifles, machine guns and revolvers. 4 Mustangs lie near the airfield. Seeing that we had no flag, this is a gratifying achievement. The Mustangs have not had their safe target practice so gratuitously after all. A few days later, AA batteries arrive for my airfield, and raids as successful as this one are not likely to be repeated. German aircraft types often appear in our area, flown by Romanians whom we have equipped with them. They now bear the Romanian markings and are flying on the Russian side. The Romanian operational base is not very far from us. We therefore spent 2 days making low-level attacks on their airfields in the area Karlsburg, Kronstadt and Hermannstadt. Malicious tongues among us suggest that we are trying to emulate the Mustangs. They would have done it before. We destroy more than 150 aircraft on the ground, some of them in the air. In any case, they are mostly training and courier planes, but even so are of use for training the Romanian Air Force. Success in attacks of this kind is to a very great extent dependent on the strength of the enemy defense. The fighting in Romania is at an end. The Soviet floods pour in over the whole country to try to force a passage into Hungary at every possible point. Tightly packed convoys are at this moment streaming through the Roter Turm Pass in the direction of Hermannstadt. Sorties against this invading spearhead are particularly difficult because this army is very strongly defended against air attack. On one flight over the northern end of the pass, 4-centimeter flak rips off the cockpit hood of my FW-190 and I find myself suddenly sitting in the open. Luckily, none of the splinters wound me. The same evening, my intelligence officer tells me that he listens almost every day to the radio propaganda broadcasts in German, atrocity stories about German soldiers and incitements of the guerrillas. The broadcaster always begins, Kronstadt calling. After communicating with the group, the first attack on this radio station is fixed for tomorrow. It must be possible to deal with these provocateurs. At daybreak, we set course for Kronstadt, an old settlement of the Transylvanian Saxons. The town shimmers straight ahead in the morning mist under the first rays of the sun. We do not need to fly over it. The transmitting station with its 2 tall masts stands on a main road above 5 miles northeast. Between the high masts is a little building, the nerve center of the whole transmitting organism. As I fly in, preparatory to going into a dive, I see a motorcar drive out of the courtyard of the building. If I could be sure its passengers were the men who are instigating the partisans to stab us in the back, it would be worth a little extra effort to catch them. The car disappears into a wood and sees our attack on the transmitting station from afar. One has to be careful not to dive too low in this attack because the masts are connected by many cables and it is easy to fly into them. The little building is centered in my sights. I press the button, pull out and circle round the masts, waiting to see the result and for my squadron to reform. By pure chance, one of my little 35-pound bombs has hit the tip of one of the masts. It snapped and bent at a right angle. There is nothing more to be seen of the building down below as the bombs have done their work. They will not be broadcasting their vicious propaganda from here for quite a while. With this comforting thought, we return to base. The increasing pressure on the Carpathian passes shows more and more clearly the extent of the damage to our strength caused by the Romanian debacle. The Soviets have advanced a long way beyond Hermannstadt. They are nearly at Torenburg and are trying to capture Klausenburg. Most of the units in this sector are Hungarian, chiefly the 1st and 2nd Hungarian armored divisions. There are practically no German reserves available to form a backbone of resistance in this important sector. The Soviet advance will imperil the German units holding the Carpathians far to the north. They will have to abandon their positions in the passes with serious consequences because the Carpathians, being a natural fortress, are the key to the Hungarian plains and it will be extremely difficult to hold them with our diminished strength. For the most part, the Soviets have had a soft job the last few weeks, for they are advancing through an allied Romania where a coherent German resistance has been impossible. Our motto has been, get out of Romania, next stop, Carpathians. But Romania has an elongated frontier and this means an extension of our already too thinly defended front. We move back for a few days to an airfield west of Sächsisch Regen, from where we make almost daily sorties over the Torenburg area. For the first time since goodness knows how long, the Iron Gustavs again participate in the fighting on the ground. On every sortie we stay in the target area as long as our petrol lasts, always hoping for an encounter with our competition from the other side. The 3rd Squadron does the bombing, escorted by the 2nd with the wing staff and myself in FW-190s. During this phase we are successful in shooting down a large number of Russian attack planes and fighters. The skipper of my 2nd Squadron, Flight Lieutenant Kennel, who has the oak leaves, has particularly good hunting. It is not actually our business as dive bombers and attack aircraft to shoot down enemy aircraft, but in the present crisis it seems to me very important for our comrades on the ground that we should master the enemy's air force. So our expert tank marksmen also engage aircraft, and with excellent results. These operations show us old Ju-87 flyers very clearly that the hounds have a better time of it than the hare. Nonetheless, we still swear by our old kites. In September 1944, the battle for the Hungarian plains becomes an actuality. At this moment, the news of my promotion to wing commander reaches me. The wing staff with ground personnel is stationed for a short time at Tasnad, south of Tokaj. The 1st and 2nd squadrons with their operational elements and myself southeast of Tasnad, the 3rd squadron moves into the Miskolc area, where they are seriously hampered by airfield conditions. The whole surrounding country, including the roads leading to the airfield, have been turned into a swamp by torrential rain. Our stay is only a short one here, where we are able to put up a fight in the area of Großwardein, Keglet, Debrecen. The Russian hordes move fast, almost exclusively by night. They remain stationary during the day, well camouflaged in the woodland near the roads or in maize fields, or keeping under cover in the villages. Bombing and aerial attack becomes of secondary importance to reconnaissance, for targets must be recognized before it is possible to do any vital damage. There is at present no cohesion on the German front. There are merely isolated battle groups hastily improvised by welding together units which have either fought their way back from Romania or have previously formed part of the lines of communication troops in Hungary. These units are a medley of all branches of the army. At special focal points, the names of crack formation appear. Infantry regiments with great traditions, armored divisions, SS formations, all old acquaintances of ours and friends with whom we have shared the hardships of the arduous years in Russia. They love and esteem their Stukas, and we feel the same. If we know that one of these units is below us, we can be sure there will be no untoward surprises. We know most of their flying control officers personally, or at any rate their voices. They indicate to us every nest of resistance, however small, and we then attack them with everything we've got. The ground units follow up our attack with lightning speed and sweep everything before them. But the enemy's numerical superiority is so immense that the biggest local successes are merely a drop in the bucket. The Russians are established to right and left of these engagements, and we have not soldiers enough to hold them there, and another breakthrough follows, with the result that even those units who are standing firm are compelled to retire lest their line of retreat be cut. This happens here time and time again until we are back on the Theiss, which is to be held as a new defensive line. This river is narrow and, in a war with modern technical resources, does not represent much of an obstacle. At Szeged, the Russians have very soon gained a strong bridgehead which we are unable to dent, and from which they make a swift thrust northwards towards Kecskemét. My wing has moved back once again, and we are now at Famos, west of Szolnok, on the railway line from Szolnok to Budapest. Our airfield is frequently visited by 4-engined American bombers, which have hitherto concentrated their attention on the railway bridge at Szolnok. We've no complaints about our rations here, because Nierman has obtained permission to shoot game, and one can almost speak of a plague of hares. Every day he returns with a big bag. Fridolin is sick on the very sight of a hare. Sometimes, now there is a real nip in the air, the year is making a giant strides towards the winter. When taking my evening cross-country run in the neighborhood of Famos, I succumb to the fascination of the plains in a way I would not have thought possible for a mountaineer like myself. We are out mostly in the vicinity of the Theiss beyond the river, but also on our side of it, as the Soviets have succeeded in forming bridgeheads on the west bank at several places. Our targets, as in the case of all previous river crossings, are concentrations of material on the river bank and on the approach roads, in addition to the constantly newly built bridges and the traffic across the river, which is partly carried out with very primitive methods. Rafts, old sailing craft, fishing boats, and private pleasure boats all ply across the narrow Theiss. Ivan has lost no time in collecting together this heterogeneous ferry service. It is chiefly active at first in the area between Szeged and Szolnok, later also further north. The creation of many bridgeheads is always a warning that the Soviets are piling up material preparatory to a fresh advance. A minor offensive of our own is being successfully conducted in the area Szolnok, Mesotur, Kisoyalas, Turkeve with the object of upsetting these preparations. We fly incessantly in support of it. The new Russian assault on the Theiss is considerably delayed and weakened by this interruption of their lines of communication, at least in this northern sector, but they are able to keep expanding the big bridgehead at Szeged and joining it up with the smaller one further north. At the end of October, the offensive is launched from the whole of this area. It begins with a thrust northwest and north from east and southeast against Kekshemet. Its objective is clear: to achieve the collapse of our defense line on the Theiss and to push forward across the plain as far as the Hungarian capital and the Danube. Ivan is extremely active in the air. He appears to have occupied the whole batch of airfields around Debrecen, and we are again in action against far superior numbers thereabouts. We are further handicapped by the loss of a number of aircraft shot down by flak, and supplies and replacements leave much to be desired. The Soviets cannot claim the credit for our predicament. They can thank their Western allies who have seriously imperiled our communications by their four-engine attacks on railway stations and towns. The patrolling of railway lines and roads by American fighter bombers does the rest. We lack the indispensable means of protecting our traffic routes owing to shortage of manpower and material. With the few aircraft left to my wing, including the anti-tank flight, I often take off on a sortie in the area southeast of Kekshemet. Our aircraft strength, for the reasons set forth above, has been so greatly reduced that one day I go out alone, escorted by 4 FW-190s, to attack the enemy's armor in this area. As I approach my objective, I can hardly believe my eyes. A long distance north of Kekshemet, tanks are moving along the road. They are Russians. Above them, like a bunch of grapes, hangs a dense umbrella of Soviet fighters protecting the spearhead. One of the officers escorting me knows Russian and promptly translates for me everything he understands. The Soviets are again using almost the same wavelength as ours. They are yelling at one another and making such an appalling din that it is a wonder anyone understands a word the other is saying. My interpreter in the 190 makes out this much: "Calling all Red Falcons. A single Stuka with 2 long bars is coming in to attack our tanks. We are sure it is the Nazi swine who shoots up our tanks. There are some Fokkers with him. You are all to attack the Stuka, not the Fokkers. He must be shot down today." During this pandemonium, I have long since come down and made an attack. One tank is on fire, 2 FW-190s are weaving above me, trying to draw off a few Lag 5s. The 2 others stick to me, maneuvering as I do. They have no intention of leaving me alone, which is bound to happen if they engage in aerial combat with any Ivans. 20 or 30 Lag 5s and Yak 9s now turn their attention to us. Apparently, the control officer on the ground directing the fighters is near the tanks, for he yells like a stuck pig. Go on and shoot the Nazi swine down. Don't you see one tank is already on fire?" For me, this is the surest confirmation of my success. Every time one of them attacks, I make a sharp turn just as he is bearing down on me. His speed prevents him from following my maneuver, and he loses his firing position because he is carried out of range. I then bank round again and come in behind him, even if at some distance away. Although I am sorry to waste my anti-tank ammunition, I fire 2 3.7 cm shells after him. Of course, I shall want them later for other tanks. Even if they now miss their mark, the chap they were intended for cannot have failed to observe their trail, and he gets a shock at seeing these fireballs streak close by him. Now again, one of those I have fired at yells, "Look out, be careful, didn't you see? The Nazi swine is firing back, look out!" He bellows as if he had already been shot down. Another, certainly the leader of the formation: "We must attack him from different angles simultaneously. Rendezvous over the village, for which I am now heading. We will discuss what is to be done." Meanwhile, I attack another tank. So far, they have not run from cover, doubtless believing that they are sufficiently protected by their fighters. Again, one bursts into flames. The Red Falcons are circling over the village and making the craziest hullabaloo. They all want to give advice on the best way to shoot down my Ju-87. The control officer on the ground rages, threatens, asks whether they have not seen that 4 tanks are already burning, and now they come back again, from different angles in fact, and I am glad that my 5th tank has used up my last round of ammunition. For if we keep up this game much longer, one cannot count on a happy ending. The sweat has been pouring off me all the time, though it is very cold outside. Excitement is more warming than any fur jacket. The same is true of my escort. Flying officers Biermann and Kienada are less afraid of being shot down themselves than of failing in their duty to protect me, yet it is more than likely that one or the other of the Ivans may say to himself, "If I cannot bring down the Stuka with the bars as ordered, I can at least have a go at the Fokkers." We set course for home. The Ivans do not stay with us for very long before turning back. For quite a while, we still hear the reproachful bellowing of the control officer on the ground and the Red Falcons making their excuses. Often, nothing stands in the way of the Russian advance apart from local units thrown together in some critical emergency and frequently composed of airfield and flag personnel and Army Service Corps troops. We lack men and material, the old story all over again. Individual gallantry and isolated actions may delay but cannot entirely check the advance of colossal numbers of men and material. The few crack units we still have left cannot be everywhere at the same time. Nevertheless, our comrades on the ground are putting up an inconceivably gallant fight. The Theiss front is no longer tenable. The next offensive line has to be the Danube. I am disturbed by signs of a Soviet thrust in the extreme south through Fünfkirchen in the direction of Kaposvar. If it succeeds, then this new position is again in danger. It is only a very short time before my fears are confirmed. The Eastern Front is collapsing more and more, yet our man here is still going strong. And he's still very much extremely lucky. The episode where he survives being strafed by a Mustang for quite some time without a scratch is remarkable, just as remarkable as his gentleman's agreement with General Ionescu, where both men agreed to ignore the declaration of war for the time being. Which is nice and all, but I can only imagine what it must have been like for Rudel being shot at immediately after takeoff. And yet he remained calm and just did a few extra circles to assess the situation with this supposedly friendly air defense. Now he's on his way to Hungary, and we shall learn about that in the next episode. See you then. Cheers.